Welcome back to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Walworth, and Carl Cannon is here with me, and we're joined by presidential historian Tevi Troy. He is the author of The Power and the Money, the epic clashes between commanders-in-chief and titans of industry, as well as several other books. Tevi, welcome back to the program.
Thanks, as always, for having me. I love Real Clear Politics.
All right. Well,
we like hearing that.
Yeah, Tevi, you have a piece out about the history of U.S. presidents in Iran. What should our listeners and viewers know about the relationship between these two countries?
Yeah, it's a good question. And when I looked into it, the history goes way back before the late 1970s when Jimmy Carter's president and the Ayatollah Khomeini takes over with, I think, a little bit of a passive assistance from Carter and his team, which is unfortunate. But the relationship goes back a long way, and I go back all the way to the 1920s. It's amazing. The first American diplomat murdered abroad was in Tehran. And actually, I was at the State Department yesterday, and there's a plaque in the lobby for State Department employees who were murdered in service to the country. The first guy was a guy named Robert Embry, was murdered by a mullah-led mob in the Calvin Coolidge administration. The Coolidge administration was pretty angry about this and forced Persia at the time, it was not yet called Iran, to pay for the warship that came to retrieve Embry's body.
Huh. Carl?
They also forced, they pressured the Iranians to execute 3 of the people who did the murder.
Right, they wanted to let him go. You're totally right about that.
Yeah.
They pressured the Iranians to do that.
You know, Tevi, it's funny. I usually go back to the Eisenhower administration when I talk about this. You know, there were, when you do these, I covered the White House for 15 years. It's when I met you, I covered the White House. And you know, you do these retrospectives on who was a successful president. What was their successes? What were their failures? And when Eisenhower left office, every, left, right, and center, they conceded that one of Eisenhower's successes was restoring the Shah, in 1953, letting the CIA do this coup and replace a democratically elected guy. He was no picnic, but with the Shah who his father had first surfaced during the Coolidge administration. And so you write about this and you think, okay, so we meddled in this country, but it begs the question, how can we ever extricate ourselves from Iran? We don't really want to be dealing with them all the time. Certainly these presidents don't, but we don't seem to be able to escape it.
Yeah, it raised the question of extricate and what it means. I mean, we haven't had diplomatic relations with them in 40 plus years, and we've got no personnel there. But they jump up and down, scream death to America, and sponsor terrorist attacks against our people, and try to build a nuclear weapon. And their whole foreign policy is about hating us and hating Israel. So there's no extrication, right? I mean, they are an enemy. Maybe they're not as powerful as China or the old Soviet Union or the Russians today, but they are still an annoying enemy that has caused the deaths of hundreds of Americans. So the only extrication is to get them back to where they were when they were allies. And under the Shah, they were a pretty good ally. Now, the Shah wasn't perfect, and I wouldn't have wanted to be detained by his security services. But at the same time, they were strong allies of the U.S. Multiple American presidents visited Iran. The Shah came to America multiple times. We talked about the close bonds between the two countries, and I think that is the best place to get back to.
Yeah, is that possible though? And is there any sort of remnant in Iranian culture today of a memory of that time? Because you see these pictures of sort of Tehran back in the 50s, relatively secular looking society, women not wearing, head to toe garb. And it looks like, doesn't quite look like Southern California, but it looks like, it doesn't look like Tehran looks today. Is that part of Iranian culture just gone after 40 years, or is there some remnant of it?
Yeah, it's funny you say it doesn't look like Southern California. I think it looks like Northern California of the 1950s. I don't know if you ever saw the movie Vertigo, with how people dress when they go downtown and they're wearing the white gloves. Everything looks pristine. It kind of looks like that. But yeah, I think there is a remnant. And you look at these polls, and obviously in a tyrannical dictatorship, it's hard to tell what's going on in the polls, but it does seem that consistently people don't like the mullahs, and they do like America, even though they don't necessarily like American or Israeli bombs falling on their cities. And I think both America and Israel were careful to try and minimize civilian casualties in the recent struggle. And so I do think it's possible to get back there, but I don't think some kind of American invasion force is going to do it. I don't believe in creating democracy inorganically and imposing it from the outside. I don't think that works. But I do think there are enough people there who want to live regular lives and not be under the torture of these fanatical mullahs that I think there is a possibility in the future.
Well, and the problem was, Tevi, and you know this, you've done this research, the Shah was friendly to America, his foreign policy was, but he had a dreaded secret police called Savak and just scared the hell out of Iranians. And they weren't, there were a lot of, it wasn't really a democratic country. And it seems to me that, I mean, regime change is a phrase in great discredit now, but for the kind of relationship you and I are imagining now, where we have peace with Iran and are actually allies, it seems to me they can't replace one totalitarian government for another. They would have to be a democratic government that had the will of the people. And
Yeah.
and I guess to Andy's point, I wonder, is that muscle memory gone in Iran? Did it ever exist? I mean, do they have democratic traditions that would allow this kind of society to flourish?
Yeah, I don't think they have democratic traditions, but I'm not sure I would call the Shah's regime a totalitarian one like you have today. I mean, the Shah did not regulate personal behavior the way the mullahs do. Now, again, I'm not favoring the Shah type led country here, but I think you could have a more open, a freer society without necessarily adopting the constitutional convention that we did here. And that's what I personally like to see. And in fact, the US presidents tried to do that. John F. Kennedy tried to encourage the Shah with what they called the White Revolution, which is where they would do more liberalizing reforms. And, it was only in the 60s that they tried this. In the 70s, the country failed and went to the mullahs. Maybe with more time, it could have worked. Maybe as the Shah moved to a successor, it could have worked. But I think Carter was a little too eager to push the Shah out the door because he was told by his people falsely that Khomeini also lied. Ayatollah Khomeini, the guy who took over Iran in the revolution, he said, we're not going to bother America. We're going to be fine. You can still get your oil. And so he sent misleading signals to the US, and the Carter administration naively accepted them.
Well, Iran, to a lot of people, certainly a certain generation, the indelible image is the American hostages at the end of the Carter administration. When you look at that, Tevi, what are the lessons of that experience, and have we learned them?
Yeah, it's a great question. And look, hostages are complicated. We see this with Israel now. Israel can do a lot of damage to its enemies, but is reluctant to do so when you have Israeli hostages. So Israel has really punched Iran in the nose and punched Hezbollah in the nose and helped get rid of Syria and has really been knocking the heck out of the Houthis. But they're limited in what they can do to Hamas because Hamas is A, hiding behind a civilian population, but B, still has 20 living Israeli hostages and more dead ones. So it just limits your options. And I think that Carter, there are some discussions in the White House records of Carter being told by his staff to get tougher on Iran and bomb Iran. And he said, will that get the hostages out alive? And so it really complicated the situation. But I do think that the lesson of the last 50 years is we do have to be tougher with Iran. Reagan went after the Iranian Navy when they were causing trouble in the Gulf, and Iran kind of backed off for a while. Trump punched them in the nose by killing Soleimani. So I think they take strength. They hear strength, they feel strength, and they back off. But in the absence of strength, if you're going to mollycoddle them, then they get more and more ambitious.
Yeah. Do you think, Tevi, that Trump's approach can work? He sort of veers between punching them in the mouth and mollycoddling them. He kind of does both Reagan and Carter sometimes in the same week.
Yeah, but they're different people.
What do you see as the
I think
what do you see as the
I don't
end
think he's
game
really
here?
mollycoddled the Iranians. He has done it to the Russians in some senses. But
Well, I meant telling Israel to stand down after he dropped those bombs. So he do you think his approach has a chance of working?
I do think it has. I'm glad that he took the step to attack the Iranian nuclear facilities. I think that was helpful. I think Iran has been quieter since then, although you hear about them trying to plan all these terrorist attacks. But that's really all they can do, which is terrible. And they've killed a lot of Israelis, Americans, Westerners with their terrorist attacks. But that's basically the card they have left. And hopefully Trump will make it clear that if they engage that card, if they use that card, they'll get punched in the head again.
Yeah. Well, we've got about a minute left here. And Tevi, I'm going to ask you the last question. Sorry, Carl. But it seems to me that, unfortunately, and I hope I'm wrong about this, but it seems to me that the lessons of the last couple of years in the Middle East are two. One, it's a good thing to hold hostages. The second is it would be a good thing to have a nuclear weapon. That in both cases, like if you're looking at this and you're a tin horn dictator, Those are two things that seem to have worked, at least so far, in their favor. Am I wrong about that, or is that just a cynical view of what's going on in the Middle East?
You're not
right
wrong,
now?
except I wouldn't say it's a good thing, because none of us think it's a good thing. Maybe an effective strategy. So it's an
All
effective
right. Yes.
thing.
No. I'm saying from the point of view, if you're sitting there, you're running some third world country, and you're looking out at the world you're facing.
Yeah,
You'd look at
Western
Libya,
hostages.
you'd look at North Korea, and say, oh, well, which dictator is still in power? Oh, the guy with the nuclear weapon.
Yeah, holding Western hostages and having nuclear weapons is a survival strategy that seems effective. And I think that's why the U.S. is so vigilant and Israel is so vigilant in not letting some of these, what you call them, tin pot dictators, from getting nuclear weapons. And also, you got to try and protect your populace so this doesn't happen, and make clear that there are repercussions if you engage in that kind of behavior against America.
Yeah. All right. Well, Tevi, always great to have you on. I've been talking with Tevi Troy, and Carl Cannon's been with me. I'm Andrew Walworth. We're going to be back with more Real Clear Politics right after these words.